Welcome to Golden Black Live, joined by Brian Newbert and Tom Dienhart, as I always am. Segment one, you know it because we're at the top of the show. It is Friday, March 4th, and we got a good show today. Mike Berghoff, the chair of the Board of Trustees, will be on in segment two, and Coach Gene Keady will join us in segment three. Of course, Gene will be in town not only for tomorrow's game against Indiana, but also it will have the opportunity to stay through the Big Ten tournament, and he's going to do that as well. So that's a good thing for the coach. And as I said, we probably ask him about his rock star status when he comes back to Mackey Arena for tomorrow in Purdue, Indiana. Brian, and we also want to thank our sponsors. That'd be a good thing. Triple X on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. Hilton Garden Inn, when tomorrow's a big day. State HDI tonight, and State Farm agent Trent Johnson at trentismyagent.com. Brian, it seems like we've been talking a lot this week, last night on Facebook Live, but Purdue's got always a special game in Mackey Arena when Indiana comes to town. Both teams have lots to prove, but maybe different ways. Indiana with its back up against the wall after losing to Rutgers, one would think they need to either win tomorrow against Purdue or do something important in the Big Ten tournament. Purdue needs to get its foundation back. I don't know. How do you view tomorrow's game, and as you look ahead to what may face Purdue in Indianapolis next week?
Well, Purdue has spent the whole season getting the best opponents have to offer. So why should this be any different? Obviously Indiana's got some pretty significant NCAA tournament stakes in this game. I would anticipate, if they're capable of such a thing, to get their best tomorrow. Purdue has to match it. And that's, part of one of the areas where, this team's probably been a little bit flawed is I don't know if they were necessarily mature enough yet at this stage of their development to match everything the opponents were throwing at them at all times and doing it over the span of 40 minutes. Tomorrow will be a good test. I think the first Indiana result was a fluke when you look at all the missed free throws. I know Purdue's not a good free throw shooting team, so don't at me. When you look at Indiana getting better because Trace Jackson Davis was out of the game so much, and when you look at Robert Finney turning into Superman completely at random, I think that was not reflective of what either of these teams are. But Purdue is going to have to prove that tomorrow, because if Indiana has it in them to deliver their very best, tomorrow would be the situation. Keep in mind, Indiana had Ohio State beat, blew it, had Wisconsin beat twice, blew it both times. Either one of those would have been a huge favor for Purdue, by the way. Nobody cost Purdue the Big Ten more than Indiana did, not only because they won in Bloomington, but because they blew it twice against Wisconsin when they had them beat. What was I even saying?
It's not going to be a cakewalk.
I think if Indiana has it in them to bring their absolute best, tomorrow would be the time to do it. They have shown they're capable of almost winning games like this one away from Assembly Hall. They just haven't been able to finish the job. And, if what the last thing you want is for this game to come down to the last couple minutes, because the way Purdue's season has gone, a blimp will probably crash into Mackey Arena or something. All the luck Purdue's had at the end of games on a variety of fronts. So Purdue has to bring its absolute best tomorrow. Where their heads are, I wouldn't anticipate there being any problems after you're eliminated from Big Ten contention after another crushing loss. But you never know. They have to prove it. They have to show significant maturity tomorrow. The good news is it's Indiana, and the arena itself should be good for some measure of energy, that if energy was going to be an issue regardless.
Yeah, Brian, you were pleased with a lot of things you saw, aside from the outcome, of course, up in Madison. You talked about the improved vigor with which the team played defense. You seemed inspired by that and encouraged. And I think Purdue had just 10 turnovers as well. I know free throw shooting was an issue. Continues, I guess it's been an issue most of the year. But just going back to the defense, you want to see that carry over. Who are some of the guys you think really dialed up the defensive effort in Madison, need to continue to do so for Purdue to keep playing well at that end of the court?
Well, I thought Eric Hunter really led it. I thought he played his what off from a defensive perspective. And that's kind of what you've been waiting on kind of all year from him, for him to really take the lead from a defensive perspective. Not that he's the only one, but he's your best equipped defender. I thought he really led by example there. And if you get that Eric Hunter in the NCAA tournament, if you defend in the NCAA tournament the way Purdue defended at Wisconsin, keep in mind, they had 65 points on their home floor before they banked in 2 shots at the end. I think their last field goal prior to that came on a putback. They did a good enough job on Johnny Davis, 5 of 13, 3 turnovers. He got his 16 points, had to bank in his last 2. I thought they did a great job on him. The problem was Tyler Wall, and you're never going to see another Tyler Wall this year because he's that Ethan Happ sort of player that you just don't see very often, except at Wisconsin. But I think if they defend the way they defended at Wisconsin as a team and not just as individuals, and they take care of the basketball the way they took care of the basketball at Wisconsin, they're going to have a chance in the Big Ten tournament. They're going to have a chance in the NCAA tournament. I thought that was, one of the most gutting, aspects of that loss, because all those other ones that you lost on flukes, you could credibly go back and say we didn't play well enough to win anyway. And at Wisconsin, obviously you missed free throws, and then Wisconsin missed the biggest free throw of the game. I should add. Is you made progress where you needed to make progress. You played the way you needed to play to win that game, and you still lost on bad bounces. That was the most, that was the most painful element of that loss, if you ask me. If Purdue had just kind of screwed around for 39 minutes, and it had come down to, that last minute, and all of a sudden the ball bounced bad on you, then that probably would be a little bit more palatable, because you would have deserved to lose. I didn't think either team deserved to lose in Madison.
All right, tomorrow also a side part of tomorrow's senior day, and Purdue will be saying goodbye to 3 guys that have really been a big part of this program for a long time. Put that into context, Brian, in terms of what those guys have meant. Of course, Eric Hunter Jr., Sasha Stefanovic, and Travion Williams, and what they've meant to this program over the last, for some of them for 5 years.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to put a broad common denominator over all 3 of them, because they're all very different. I think Sasha Stefanovic has been one of the steadiest guys Purdue's had in this program in recent years. I think that his value will come out more next year when he's not there, because I think you will realize how valuable he was, from an offensive perspective, especially because he was such an enormous part of what they did. It's not a coincidence that Big Ten teams do things they never do from a defensive perspective just to try to stop him, because they understand the role he has played and the gravity he has carried within Purdue's offense. As he's gone, Purdue has kind of gone. So much of what they run offensively during this really, prolific era of offense at Purdue, he's been a huge part of. I think obviously Travion Williams has been a borderline star at Purdue. He was an All-American last year. This season, has been a little bit complicated for him. Early in the year, he became not only the face of Purdue, but one of the faces of college basketball, because people saw an All-American coming off the bench and they made the story about him. And rightfully so. A lot of people wouldn't have been cool with that. And not that he was going to, not that he had any options into his senior year, but I think his attitude has been good. I think he's always been a little bit inconsistent. As good a player as he's been, I think he could have been capable of, a lot more if he was a little more consistent personally and as a basketball player, things like that. But you can't argue with productivity, and he has been really productive, and he has been really clutch. He has made so many big shots for Purdue in big situations, more than probably any other player I can remember. At Purdue, Jaden Ivey's catching up quickly. Won't be around long enough to to match Williams' total, but he's getting there. Eric Hunter obviously has had a little bit of an up and down career. Has played some of his best basketball when it has mattered the most here in the back half of this season. I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. I think it was an adjustment for him this year coming off the bench, same way it probably was for Travion Williams. But he really, if he finishes out his career like he played at Wisconsin, Purdue's going to be tough. But what's interesting about the senior class more than anything is they've been through everything. I mean, there's nothing that could happen to a college basketball player that those guys haven't endured. They've won the Big Ten. They've essentially missed the NCAA tournament. They've had a season canceled due to a pandemic. They made the Elite Eight, got to the doorstep of the Final Four. They were ranked number 1 in the country. They've won games in every way, shape, and form. They've lost games in every way, shape, and form, and they've just been pretty steady throughout. I don't know if any of them were ever stars. I don't know if any of them were ever that really overt kind of leader you think seniors ought to be sometimes. You hope seniors will be sometimes, but they were all just steady.
Yeah, good point. And pretty. You think about it, it's hard to believe that all 3 of those guys played in the game against Virginia. I think back in the 2019. And played a role in it. Eric Hunter Jr. really kind of had a coming out a little bit in the NCAA tournament that year, really stepping forward. So, credit to all those guys, and it will be, as senior days always are, emotional and mackie for those guys and for the fan base. All right, Tom, you'll be matriculating to likely the Mollenkopf practice facility for practice number 3 for Purdue football in the spring drills. I don't know if it's easy to say there's a storyline. I guess part of it has been maybe that the guys that aren't playing, but there's also a lot of newcomers that you're getting a look at. What has been that story from your perspective? And you got a couple more practice you're going to be able to attend in their entirety. What are you looking for?
Yeah, you talked about the newcomers, Alan. I think the guy that stood out for anybody who's watched these first few practices is Tyrone Tracy. Where's David Bell's number 3? Of course, the Iowa transfer who played high school football in Indianapolis. Dynamic player. Tyrone Tracy was a starter in Iowa City. And Purdue's not only using him as a receiver, but he's also been lining up in the backfield as well. So about 6 feet tall, 205 pounds. It brings a little different element to that backfield that they really lack. And it's going to be fun to see how he's used moving forward. I think he's also going to be a guy who runs backs kicks. So he's been an intriguing newcomer so far. Scotty Humpich, the Leo from Murray State. I think he has a real chance to make an impact. And guys, that Leo spot's pretty fascinating. When you got Humpich, Kydron Jenkins isn't practicing this spring because of a biceps injury. He's back. Sounds like, or it seems like, Yanni Karloff is probably going to move to Leo. And then don't forget about the 4-star recruit Nick Carraway coming here this summer too. He also could play the end spot, but long story short, there's some interesting talent between Leo and then even that end spot. So it's going to be fun watching that position continue to sort itself out. And you talked about the players missing out. There's a lot of key personnel missing, obviously. I'm also watching the quarterback competition. We had the drama with Michael Alamo recently, going into the portal, coming back. Who's really going to be the number 2 quarterback? I mean, I know it's a minor storyline, but it's with Purdue's luck with quarterbacks and injuries of late, it's always an interesting battle to keep your eye on as well. So, it's always a fun time of year. I know these things get overblown, overhyped, because there's a void in football information at this time of year. It does whet your appetite. I know it excites me and excites a certain amount of people out there as well, just to have some football out there, guys in pads and moving around. And it's been a lot of fun early on.
Brian, as we close this segment, and obviously you've been focused so much on basketball and basketball recruiting, et cetera, but you look at that perspective. Anything else, just as you look at what you want to get accomplished this spring, if you're Jeff Brom, what might be the end game when Purdue plays in that spring game on April the 9th?
I think you want to establish your next generation of offensive playmakers. And, for one thing, I don't know if that happens in the spring or that happens this season, but obviously, you have some pretty big shoes to fill with David Bell gone. You have a void, at least for the time being, with Milton Wright not being out there. I assume he's not out there.
Correct.
He's not out.
So I think it's always important, I think, in spring. And I think spring's becoming more important than ever because everybody's got these transfers coming in. And I think this is sort of onboarding season. I think it's especially important nowadays to get the Tyrone Tracy's and get the Elijah Canyons and whatnot up to speed and figure out what they can do and figure out how you can craft your offense to their strengths, kind of things like that. Get them on the same page with their quarterbacks, get them, fully immersed in the playbook, stuff like that, because, we can, as soon as Aiden O'Connell came back, Purdue is back in the game this year. I mean, they have an opportunity to have the same sort of season this year, I think, that they had last year, but they're going to have to do it with offense. I think you always have to do it with offense at Purdue. And I think they are going to have to figure out who those guys are at the wide receiver position more than anything.
Yeah, going to be a storyline that, and you're right, it may be the fall before a lot of those guys, because there's some guys on the shelf this spring at that position, but lots to follow. That's one thing good about having 85 scholarship players or whatever it is, Tom. There's a lot of names to get to know, and you can't tell the players without a program anymore. That's at least that's my problem. But I do know that Tyrone Tracy is number 3, and it sounds like he's going to make an impact. So, all right, guys, I want to thank you both, and we will take a short break. Be joined next segment with Mike Berghoff, the chair of the Board of Trustees and the former athletic department liaison, but still is close to Purdue athletics, has a lot to talk about in terms of, I'm sure we'll hit things on the Purdue Ross 8 Stadium project, etc. And then, of course, segment 3 will be Coach Gene Keady, and he'll be back for this weekend and for the next week as well. It'll be fun for Purdue fans, I'm sure, to see him in Mackey Arena tomorrow. So stay tuned. We'll see you in a couple of minutes on Gold and Black Live.